and to listen to them, to get them involved in decisions, to see what ideas they have, and, to really make it sort of a team effort. I think, it's interesting. Puerto Rico is sort of in the middle of things. We're not fully Americans, and we have a lot of links, I find, towards Latin America. So this inclusion discussion is something. We're also an island that we sort of see from a distance. But I also think that, at least in the case of the Ponce Art Museum, we have made a significant effort to bring in the community. We did it after, even before, but certainly after the hurricane, where the museum was free of charge because none of us had any cash. And we weren't able to charge because, there was no internet, there was no system anywhere. And we've also, there are grants available to be able to ask for money and bring people in. Or as Amanda is saying, we started with programs going to people, to public housing, to, maybe not bring an exhibition to them, but bring an artistic experience. We've also done some work with a school up in the mountains of Puerto Rico, so we've been, after the earthquake, we also reached out to the people. They couldn't come to the museum. We had to close the museum right after the earthquake in 2020, but we did a lot of workshops in the shelters, and we tried to reach out to them. But I do think that you need to change those power structures that are in place and rethink those in order to really be able to make a significant change.
Now, Sylvia, we just completed 2 different polls. One was when a museum exhibits American art, you expect to encounter. What do you expect to encounter? 78% said art produced by American artists who are white. And then 48% said American artists who are male. And then the rest of the answers were distributed pretty much along different ethnic groups. Right, so you end up with this sort of confirmation of, in the past, power. Do you believe that that museums need to take a different tact today? We just had a comment saying that the concept of museums giving voice to underrepresented viewpoints is rather modern. It's very recent. Do you believe that museums have a role now that is fundamentally different than might have been conceived in the past? How do you see it?
Yes, I do, because because everything has changed. The community is growing. The community is more diverse. The community is more informed, and so I think we have to break down those systems. And many times, it has been said that the museums are one of the last monuments that needs to be broken down because of its infrastructure. There's collections, its resources. They have to share those resources. They have to sometimes deaccession artworks that really don't belong to them. They belong to other communities. And so, and I think they have to be more representative of the communities. And also, I think make room for organizations like ours, like organizations of color, and share the resources. Our organization, our museum, we're going on our 38th year. We are a product of the community. We are the voice of the community, and we exist because of the community, because there wasn't anything for the Latinos, for the Mexican Americans, for our community here. And so it was through talking to public officials, because the only way, we do not have the resources with individuals, with the private sector. There are not resources within Austin, Texas, to support major museums from our own community. So we have to go to the public resources. Like that is specifically, that is a trend throughout the United States of most organizations of color have been born or exist because of major public funding. I mean, we just got 3 years ago, a $20 million bond through the city of Austin to renovate our building. So we're going to be renovating we own the building, which also was through a service agreement. All of those things are through through public support, because otherwise museums like mine, this museum, not mine, but our communities, would not exist without public resources. And so, yes, things have to change, but and things have to change on the people who control the funding. The funding needs to be shared, it needs to be put out equitably, so that we can catch up with the other major institutions. Because, you know, most museums are 100 years old. We're 38 years old, and there's museums that are 2 years old that are across the country. And so resources have to be shared federally, in the federal level, state level, local level, foundation level, private level, so that we are equitable. Because at the end of the day, we have to serve our community. And we are in downtown Austin. We are in the center of the city, and it is on purpose. It is on purpose that we are here. We looked for a building that was in the center of downtown, because this used to be where the Mexican American people lived. And we put murals on the side of a building, and we do bilingual messages in English and Spanish, so that the people who speak Spanish know that there is something for them in downtown Austin. We go to the communities to teach the classes, and, you know, where people don't have resources. We have a free day, just like in Mexico and most of Latin America. Sundays are free. Sundays are free, and people are not intimidated to walk into museums. And so we continue that same tradition that I saw in Mexico when I lived there. When I walked into the Museo de Arte Moderno, I would see indígenas barefooted in the Museo de Arte Moderno. And that stayed within my mind, that I wanted everyone to be able to feel that they were welcomed in our museum.
See, that's such an important point, right? The important point is to not think that your preconception, Sylvia, or yours, Alejandra, or yours, Amanda, or mine, is the way to experience a museum, right? It's the way to enter the museum. Barefoot is fine, right? It's really the issue of how do you meet people where they are, which is what you're pointing out, right? How do you create different stories? You know, it strikes me that there is, while there is a lot of tension in society amongst different groups, as we all struggle for power and voice within our various societies, there's also a lot of interest in hearing the voice of others, right? Of really giving space. And really trying to be informed. We took another poll, which we asked why do people mostly go to museums, and we found 52% said for stimulation in general, and then also to experience new artists. And then a last poll, we asked about how important is it that different genders, orientations, races, religions, perspectives be equally represented in museums. And of course, it's a select group, but 65% said absolutely critical, and 19% said very important, and 3% said important, and 13% said beneficial. So you've got this whole spectrum that really does weigh to diversity within museums. That's a really interesting idea. So let's go around the table and talk, because we're coming to the end of our time. We'll give you the first word, Sylvia, then Alejandra, and you, Amanda. If you were going to make one major change to museums to position them as vital places of dialogue and attendance and excitement in today's world, what would you change? Sylvia?
I would make all museums free.
All museums free?
I would make them all free, because at the end of the day, people do not come because of the you have to pay to come in. When we have free, it's just packed. And so I believe that is the main obstacle, is that in the museums you have to pay.
Meaning that museums are not just for the tourists who visit and the people who are there who can pay admissions. Museum is there for everyone.
Exactly.
Alejandra, if you were to make one change to make, now you can't choose Sylvia's thing.
That's a hard one because I was thinking the same thing as Sylvia. We have exactly the same experience, but if not, I think that we would have to do what we do, like to be closer to our community and see what really interests them and how we can make them comfortable and meet them where they are, which is like what you were saying. I'm surprised when people say, yeah, we hired certain people because certain people would come to the museum and wouldn't see people like them. And I'm like, where do you even live, right? So it's, I think to me, that's important to make people feel comfortable, that it's a space that they own, that it's theirs, that I really think, we owe ourselves to our communities. And I think one of the main reasons why we're changing, some of us do it because of conviction, but others because there's a certain transparency right now expected from us. And we just can't get away with things anymore. And I like to say that really if something has made the museum world change in the past year, it has been the Black Lives Matter movement and the pandemic. And if we were resisting to move into the 21st century, these two things have really pushed us to the other side. And we have to come out on the other side of the tunnel completely transformed, or we will be completely obsolete.
That is such a great point. Amanda, what is your thing that you would change about the museum world if you had your ability to do that?
I would say, can I say it's just one thing, right? It can't be
But
two.
you can say two things if you want.
Okay. One thing is that collections are really important, like which communities are represented in the collections. So I would do like aggressive policy in terms of collecting underrepresented communities, because it's gonna stay for the future, and that's gonna build up the new history of art, what is in the collections, not just in exhibitions. And on one hand, on the other hand, already Sylvia and Alejandra have spoke about this, is related to funding. Funding is essential for museums to operate. So therefore, I think even private museums should have public funding. I mean, not all of it, but should be publicly funded. I think in Mexico, there's some private museums, but the public cultural system is very strong. Well, right now, more or less, but it's very strong. But I think this model of being funded mainly privately has a lot of consequences, not just in terms of the operation or the scale of museums, but in terms of what is the demand of what is being presented in those museums, and how directors are constrained. So that is a model that do not allow to have like a more critical conversation, because it put like deep strains on the development of museums in terms of like having a more like socially engaged or a more critical conversation. So I think, but the state should have a role, definitely a more active role in the preservation of culture and in, the notion of culture as development.
So what you're saying is that as long as museums are funded by wealth, then wealth talks. And when museums are funded more democratically, then other voices can emerge. It's not to say that one voice is wrong or right or anything else. It's just that multiple voices, if it's aligned to who already has power, then the voice gets skewed. And to create balance, you have to rebalance these institutions. I think it's a fantastic point. I am going to mangle your names one more time, and I beg your forgiveness. I'd like to thank you all. Amanda de la Garza, Director of Mexico City Museo Universitario de Arte Contemporaneo. Alejandra Peña-Gutierrez, Director of Puerto Rico's Museo de Arte Ponce. Arte Ponce, sorry about that, Arte de Ponce. And Sylvia Orozco, Executive Director of Austin, Texas Mexic-Arte Museum. Thank you so much for your patience with my very poor Spanish pronunciation. I will impose on you in 6 months. We're going to invite you back to have another discussion to see whether some of these ideas, which are currently in discussion in the museum world, gain some traction. I'd like to also thank our attendees who have contributed an enormous number of questions, a spate of which came in right toward the end. I tried to get to as many of them as possible. Thank you all for attending. And I'd like to thank you, wonderful leaders, for sharing your unique perspectives. This is an incredibly valuable discussion. I'm so very thankful that you were able to make the time for us.